Hello and welcome. My name is Daniel Morrow. Welcome to this webinar called Off the Grid, 12 Powerful Practices to Protect Your Brain, Immune System, Cells, and DNA from Toxic EMF Signals. So that's me on December 24th on 2015. We actually had no snow on the ground Christmas Eve. It was pretty amazing. A little bit about me. Lots of academia, electronic engineering, BAs in math, music psychology, and honors in psychology. I did a master's degree in cognitive science and was in a graduate program doing quite a few PhD level courses. After I got out of school, that's when I started developing really interesting stuff, at least interesting from my point of view. I developed some signature programs. I taught them live as home study programs, and now I'm doing them sort of as webinars and online courses as well. Things like Build Yourself a Better Brain, Heart Intelligence, Musical Brain, Accelerated Learning, Musical Medicine, Your Brain and Creativity, the Microbiome for Brain Health, and I did a 7-day brain health marathon in August. I published a book 2013 called Build Yourself a Better Brain. You can find that on Amazon. It's an ebook. Also created a magazine 2014. I've got 14 or 15 issues. You can see the first 3 there. Prominent neuroscientist in the middle. There's Barbara Aerosmith Young, who I interviewed on the left. She had severe brain damage at birth, and she actually healed it by doing brain-based exercises that she developed. Now teaches learning disabled kids in Toronto. She's got a couple schools. Amazing story, amazing lady. Daniel Amen, a pioneer in brain imaging. He scanned like 80,000 people, I think. All sorts of different topics we cover in the magazine: yoga, mobile addictions, music and language, the cerebellum, the microbiome, the hippocampus, and so forth. So that's on iTunes. This digital magazine's on iTunes. It used to come out bi-monthly. Now it's coming out quarterly. I launched a podcast August of last year, but we didn't get past the first episode, so I plan to actually relaunch that probably in the fall of this year, and then have weekly episodes, 20-minute episodes. That's also on iTunes. You can actually find the first episode there. Go check it out. High Performance Brain Podcast. You'll hear me, my little intro music and voiceover, and 20 minutes of content. I also do personalized brain health consultations. I sometimes offer these as bonuses with my workshops, but I've had some great success with this, working with people with concussions and all sorts of specialized topics. So an overview where we're going with this program: take a look at some basics of the brain, how the brain is built. I want to go over some electromagnetic frequency or EMF radiation categories. Is there a research consensus on health impact or damages caused by microwave radiation, radio frequencies, EMFs? Indeed, there appears to be. We'll look at the primary EMF polluters, things like smart meters and phones, cordless phones, smartphones, dirty electricity, and all sorts of things. Smart meter, we're going to highlight for a few slides. These are particularly nasty devices that have come around the last few years. We're looking at the impact of EMFs, how they influence free radical activity in cells. And finally, we're going to look at least 12 different simple yet powerful practices to protect your brain, your immune system, your organs, your cells, and your DNA. So with that said, I'm going to start the presentation in full screen mode. So that's Off the Grid, 12 powerful practices to protect your brain, immune system, cells, and DNA from toxic EMF signals. So that was the overview. And now your biocomputer. You have inside your skull one of the most sophisticated, self-contained biological computers in the known universe, called your brain, made up of neurons, neural networks, 2 hemispheres, 4 regions, a cerebellum, a brain stem, a limbic system, and the higher cortical areas known as the cortex. So we've basically got 3 brains. And the fourth, if you consider the cerebellum, 80 to 100 billion neurons are the basic building blocks, but they're very sophisticated. Each neuron is like a universe in itself, and it operates according to both digital and analog principles. The neurons take inputs from dendrites. They summate them or sum them. do calculations on them, and then spit out a signal, which is either a 1 or a 0. That's the digital part. That goes down the axon, and that gets transmitted around to other networks in the brain. Now, what's important for tonight's seminar is that our brain operates according to both electrical and magnetic principles. And it turns out that the brain actually mirrors principles seen in modern electrical networks and circuitry. If you look at networks, they have resistors and capacitors and inductors and things for storing charge and so forth. So you can do calculations with electronic circuits, you can send signals around, but it's also magnetic. So what that means is if you take a current carrying conductor, you'll measure a magnetic field around the conductor, okay, the wire. Likewise, if you just have a wire sitting there and you apply a magnetic field to it, you'll see current going down the wire. Okay, so you'll actually induce a current. So that's what's happening in the brain. That's what's important for tonight's session, because if you think about the electromagnetic fields external to us, they're actually inducing currents in the neurons in our brain, right, which are unnatural because there's about 1 million times the amount of electromagnetic frequency pollution on the planet today than there was prior to Industrial Revolution, computer technology, electricity, and all the stuff we have now, satellites, radio frequencies, television signals, and so forth. Something called the blood-brain barrier is kind of protective wall between the rest of the body and the brain so that toxic chemicals and toxic substances don't get in the brain. This is a very sensitive device, obviously, so it's considered like the holy grail of brain protection. But as we'll see, it's actually possible to exacerbate or damage the blood-brain barrier, and then you end up with all sorts of problems like inflammation, which leads to neurodegenerative disorders. Now, there's something called your heart brain, which is a little brain in your heart. It's got about 40 or 50,000 neurons. It turns out there's 4 different modes with which the heart communicates with all the other areas of the body, including the brain. And finally, we have something called cellular intelligence, which at the cellular level, individual cells do indeed respond to EMFs, as we'll find out, but not so much in a good way. So that's the toroidal field around the heart. It's like shaped like a donut. It's many, many times greater than the field around the brain. So the heart is indeed a very intelligent biological resonator that has an impact on the brain, the neuroendocrine, the organs, and the cells of the body. So we're talking about not just impacts to our brain, but also our heart, also to the organs, and also to the cells, and finally the DNA, the very genetic blueprint from which we're designed, at least on a physical level. Now, there's different categories of electromagnetic radiation. There's something called non-ionizing radiation, extremely low frequencies, radio frequencies, microwaves, and visual light. So microwaves are not just a thing in your so-called microwave oven. They're more of a general class of EMFs. So that's non-ionizing radiation. Now we have some non-ionizing radiation sources, such as microwave ovens, as I pointed out, but also computers, Wi-Fi networks, cell phones, Bluetooth signals, power lines, and MRIs. So those are the non-ionizing radiation. And then we come to the ionizing radiation, such as gamma rays, UV rays, and X-rays. Those are considered, traditionally, ionizing radiation was considered damaging. It heats up the body. It creates damage from the radiation. In contrast to non-ionizing, which was not considered problematic. But as we'll see in this presentation, both sources are a challenge to the brain and body. So the thing you got to understand is there's so many different EMF variables that sort of work together to sort of work against human health, we'll say. We've got the intensity, as you may expect. Peak EMFs or higher intensity EMFs correlate with greater damage to the brain and body. Then there's duration, right? Wherein some health effects may only be noticed years later. We find that with cell phones, where people are getting tumors, but it might take 10 to 15 to 20 years for them to show up. So duration is certainly a key, and intensity. Then we have cumulative EMF exposure because of all the different devices, hair dryers, then we're in the buses and cars, the computer radiation, neon lights, the wiring in the house, cell phones, smartphones, heaters, microwaves, right? So there's just all these various devices that we're constantly being exposed to. Now you have something which makes things even worse, which is EMF transient signals or fluctuating signals. if you've got a fluctuating electromagnetic frequency, they're more biologically stressful. And this will come into play when we talk about smart meters, because it's a pulsed signal. So fluctuating EMFs are biologically stressful. They're worse than the other kinds of signals. Then we've got the high frequency EMFs, X-rays, gamma rays, UV, as I mentioned, the ionizing radiation, which has always been understood to be potentially damaging. Then we've got another issue. The final point is superimposed signals. So with radio's frequencies like FM and AM, you've got a signal that's superimposed on the carrier wave, right? So it turns out the signal can be more harmful than the carrier. The carrier is actually carrying the signal information. And we'll see that this is an issue with something called dirty electricity. Now, let's look at the spectrum so we understand it. So I'm going to do oh, my mouse doesn't work in this case because I've got the full screen. Okay, too bad. So I'm just going to have to point out what we see on the screen. So we go from the very left, 0 hertz, all the way to the very right, 10 to the 21 hertz, or 10 followed by 21 zeros. So what we see here is the non-ionizing radiation, which was conventionally considered not harmful. That consists of computer and power lines. Then we move up to TV broadcast and radio. So radio, for instance, FM, going from 87 to 108 megahertz. Then we go up to the gigahertz. You can see with the mobile phone, smart meters, Wi-Fi, and remote control, we're going from 1.9 gigahertz all the way up to about 5.8. So Wi-Fi 2.4 to 5.8. Smart meters, they go from about 0.9 to 2.45. So you can see there's these different ranges and categories of these electromagnetic frequencies. Then finally we got microwaves that go from 30 to 30 gigahertz. And then you got infrared. You can see the very far end of that first part of the graph, infrared. And infrared can be healing in terms of infrared saunas and things of that nature. But those signals in between can be problematic. Then we go to the right, we see the ionizing radiation, which we mentioned earlier. So that's basically a graph of the spectrum of frequencies. Excuse me. Let's look at the big picture now. So we've got the national toxicology. So we're going to look at sort of overview of research in the next few slides. The National Toxicology Program found significant increase in brain cancer from cell phone frequencies. Significant increase in brain cancer. Now, cell phone manufacturers will try and tell you their phones are safer and it's not an issue, but of course, there's a comp. The Bioinitiative Report, 2012, which featured 2,000 papers, concluded that wireless technologies jeopardize human health and recommended stricter standards and lower exposure limits. That's the Bioinitiative Report. Then we had, in 2015, international scientists got together. This was some 220 peer-reviewed papers from 41 different countries, and collectively they offered warnings about cell phones, the infrastructure grid, Wi-Fi routers, and smart meter grid technologies. And we got them plastered all over the place in Canada, across the many provinces. And there's issues, as we'll see. Health Organization stated, classified that wireless radiation was a 2B carcinogen, meaning potentially carcinogenic, based on studies that they looked at that linked cell radiation to brain tumors. At some key EMF radiation culprits, we're going to look at something called dirty electricity. We're going to look at smartphones and cordless phones. We're going to look at Wi-Fi routers, laptop radiation, and we're finally going to look at smart meters. And towards the sort of the last third of the presentation, we'll go over some quick tips, at least 12 different practices to help you shield and protect and detoxify yourself from these different forms of radiation. So what is dirty electricity? If you haven't heard about it, it's like this extra electromagnetic smog that's sort of carried on your electricity running through the 60 hertz lines in your house. So it's this extra thing that's superimposed. Remember we talked about superimposed signals being more harmful. So you've got what's called dirty power, because it's all this extra electromagnetic garbage that gets tacked on to the electricity in the wiring all throughout your home. And so dirty electricity is essentially that have imposed on the house wiring from different sources. That could be appliances, that could be mobile devices, that can be just background radio frequencies and so forth. Now, the environmental impact is that dirty electricity will negatively impact the health of pretty much any living thing, children, adults, animals, plants. There is a solution, however, which we'll talk about later, and that's filtering. You can use something called Graham-Stetzer or Stetzerizer filters, which can significantly reduce this electrostatic noise on the wiring in your house. Now, let's go to cell phones. Are they safe? Well, obviously, you've probably heard lots about cell phones by now. Essentially, there's a few issues that it's coming out of the research with cell phones in terms of the physical impact. First of all, they're known to cause gliomas in the brain or schwannomas in the ear. So these are types of tumors, gliomas in the brain or schwannomas of the ear. Now, why the ear? Well, where's the cell phone, right? Most of the time, people are using the cell phone next to one side of their head. And you find the tumor often resembles the shape of the cell phone. Now, EMFs from cell phones may also affect brain in terms of changes in brain glucose metabolism after the cell is used. So brain glucose, that tells you how much activity there is in the body, how much glucose being used up in the brain or metabolized, tells you which parts of the brain are kind of active. And so what happens is when you've got the cell phone radiation next to your head, it's changing that glucose metabolism, which is a function or a reflection of brain activity. So it's changing your brain activity, essentially. So EMF cell radiation may also cause dementia. And this is a big problem because we see dementia increasing in North America in both women and men. The ratios are slightly different in women and men, but you get things like memory loss, learning disabilities, and holes in the blood-brain barrier. Remember we said that protective coating that's supposed to protect your brain? Well, that can be damaged by EMFs from cell phones and damaged DNA. Big issue if we start damaging our DNA. Obviously, it's got aging implications here. And finally, the electromagnetic frequencies from your cell phone can reduce your antioxidant defenses. And they've done studies and they've showed that actually lowers the saliva antioxidant levels following 1 hour of cell use. And if you look at how digestion works, digestion actually starts in your mouth with saliva. So then if you're lowering antioxidants, then you're going to impact digestion because that's the very beginning of the chain. Now here's an interesting slide because what they've actually found is how EMFs impact the cells is they don't directly damage the cell, but they do derange the cellular metabolism because they impact the calcium, and the calcium is very important in this whole chain reaction in the cell itself. So what happens is that free radicals are produced by the change in the metabolism, and then that causes damage. So that's the chain reaction that happens from the EMF bombarding the cells. So this is a problem at the cellular level. EMF activation increases free radical production. We know that free radicals in the brain and body are a problem. That's why people are known to take high antioxidant foods, something else we'll be talking about. Now, this was a very interesting study that was done. There's a sham cell, and then you see a couple of other cells in the upper right and lower. And this is the absorption rate. SAR means signal absorption rate. And what you see here is this, the scientists did a study comparing if the cell is exposed to 24 hours of continuous radiation from the cell phone, 24 hours below, versus upper right, cell is exposed to 1,600 chest x-rays. Now imagine if you got 1,600 chest x-rays, chances are you ain't going to be too healthy after that, because they obviously try to limit the number of x-rays you have in a given time frame. So the 1,600 x-rays, that's equivalent to 24 hours of continuous cell phone radiation based on this study. Very, very profound result here. Really compelling, I would suggest. Now, microwave cell phone affects absorption in the brain according to age. So we've got here a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, an adult, And what happens is younger children have thinner skulls. So what happens is more of the radiation is absorbed into the brain. You see with the adult, the sort of right side of the brain is being impacted. The red is the hot areas. In the 5-year-old, though, however, it's like 3/4 of the brain is absorbing this energy from the cell phone. So this is a big issue. It's a lecture from Dr. Davis. I'm just going to show you about the first 3 minutes of that, so enjoy.
iPads and other devices are called tablets because they belong on tables. They are tested 20 centimeters away from that big guy that I showed you before. 20 centimeters away. They are not approved to be held in the laps of little children, although millions of kids are having them now in schools because the people involved in educational technology and those involved in public health research are not talking to one another. Because if they were, they would understand that you're giving children a two-way microwave radiating device, and if you must give them such a device for learning purposes, put it on airplane mode so that it's not sending and receiving signals as it does otherwise. Now, this is some new modeling, again, that we've developed with colleagues in Brazil, and we can share with you how we've done it. We first start out with the MRI and create the model with 1 millimeter voxels, and this is quite a bit of work goes into creating this, and here is what it looks like after a period of 6 minutes. And that's really not as bad as it might look, because you see the red area only gets partway through the eye of the adult, right? The one that we're really concerned about is this one with the young child. And this is a 3-year-old brain that we modeled. And you see that by the end of that 6-minute call, the peak radiation, yellow and red, is getting all the way into almost both eyes. And again, this is one call, and it's not going to kill anybody. It may not cause any biological effect whatsoever for 1 call or 2 calls or 3 calls. But the question is, what's the cumulative impact of this kind of exposure? How do we evaluate it? And I want to show you an example of some of the work that we are doing now that I'm releasing here for the first time. And this is a modeled microwave radiation dose of a 6-year-old with greater levels to the frontal and temporal lobes, eyes and cheek. And watch this here. Now, yellow, white, and red are the hottest, all right? And if you look carefully, you will see it's going into the eye, the nose. Do it again, just so you'll get to see it. And partly into the brainstem. Now, that's just showing you that there's going to be some exposure into that area of a young head. It doesn't tell you that there's any biological effect, right? Now, the next slide is going to show you something that might be of interest to students and faculty here. And that has to do with exposure to the reproductive organs. We call them the gonads. I think you say the testicles, and bone marrow. And look here at the radiation as it gets into the groin area. And that's just from having a mobile phone modeled into the pocket. And this, again, is based on a normalized SAR with a dipole antenna. Now, the breast. The breast is mostly fat, contains a lot of fluid. Things that contain fat and fluid cook faster in the microwave oven. Now, a cell phone can't cook anything, all right? Mobile phones do not pop popcorn. That was a fraud. They don't make any heat that we know of, otherwise they wouldn't be permitted. But they do go through things that contain fat and fluid, and we are now working at Environmental Health Trust with scientists at the University of California, San Francisco, scientists at formerly the president of the American Cancer Society of California, because we are seeing women who keep cell phones in their bras. Has anyone seen a woman put a cell phone in her bra? Hands up, please. Please tell them you've heard now why they shouldn't do that. And here I want to show you our first case report from 2009, and we now have many more. This was a Chinese-American woman who used her cell phone 4 hours a day in her bra for 10 years while she was driving. Now, and you drive with a phone on your body. The phone is smart. It's going to go from one tower to another, and it's going to say, here I am, where are you, here I am. And it's going to be going to max power each time it moves from one cell tower to another. And there it was right next to her chest. And the tumors that developed right under the antenna of the phone. Unusual tumors. But in the meantime, people have a right to know how you can minimize exposure.
Okay, so let's look at Wi-Fi. Is Wi-Fi safe? We're swimming in Wi-Fi in government buildings, corporations, cafes, coffee shops, and even homes. So here's a list of organizations that ban or warn against wireless technology. We've got, let's go down to the bottom there. The UK Department of Education said that children under 16 should not use cell phones. 2002, 3,000 physicians in Germany recommend banning cell phone use by children and banning cell phones and cordless phones in preschool, schools, and hospitals. Let's go to 2005. Austrian Medical and Vienna Medical Association warn against Wi-Fi and cordless phones and cell phone use by children. The same in Frankfurt, Germany. They state that they will not install Wi-Fi in school in 2006 until it's been shown to be harmless. 2006, also in UK, they removed their wireless networks. 2007, Australia. The explosion in wireless communication technology is causing widespread illness, according to Australian Democrats. 2008, the International Commission on Electromagnetic Radiation, Electromagnetic Safety, recommends limiting cell phone use by children, teenagers, and pregnant women. 2008, we have Lakehead University in Ontario that bans Wi-Fi on campus. And then also 2008 in India, they banned cell phones in schools, both students and teachers. 2008 in France, National Library of France and Paris, France, they removed Wi-Fi from 4 public libraries because of health concerns. Same with Saint Genevieve University. 2008, Russian National Committee for Non-Ionizing Radiation warns that cell phones are unsafe even for short conversations. 2008, University of Pittsburgh Cancer Institute, children should never use a cell phone, except in an emergency. St. Clair, France, bans Wi-Fi in public schools in 2009. Continuing on, again in India in 2009, they banned cell phones in all schools and pre-university college. Moving to December 2010, we see French Parliament passes a law prohibiting advertising cell phones to children under 14. And then in 2011, Council of Europe passes a resolution recommending wired internet connections in schools. So you can use Ethernet instead of having the Wi-Fi routers, much safer. And they also talked about the creation of radiation-free zones to protect electrosensitive people. So certain people are more electrosensitive. 2011, also in August, the Israeli Ministry of Education publishes strict guidelines limiting the use of mobile phones in all school grounds, citing children's and youth's increased risk of malignant tumors. The Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association were citing safety concern, calling for a ban on new Wi-Fi installations in the province's 1,400 plus Catholic schools, and warning that computers in all new schools should be hardwired. 2012, the Austrian Medical Association releases guidelines for the diagnosis and treatment of health problems caused by exposure to EMFs. Again, Russia, 2012, Russian National Committee on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection has officially recommended that Wi-Fi not be used in schools. Remember, they used to think that non-ionizing radiation was not a problem. Here we are in Russia in 2012 saying otherwise. And then in Israel, 2012, in August, Israeli Minister of Health, Rabbi Yaakov, states that he supports call to action for a ban on Wi-Fi in schools. Again, with India, 2013, Supreme Court holds a decision of the High Court of the state of Rajasthan to remove all cell towers from the vicinity of schools, colleges, hospitals, and playgrounds because of radiation, quote, hazardous to life. And coming towards the end now of this research, in August, the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, representing 76,000 teachers, recommends that cell phones be turned off in classrooms, that all Wi-Fi transmitters be labeled. And 2013 in Mumbai, India, adopted a policy prohibiting cell towers on colleges, schools, hospitals, orphanages, and juvenile correction homes, and so forth, prohibiting nearby antennas from being directed towards such buildings. It's very, very nasty and toxic. 2014, again, and this time in West Bengal, India, they ordered a cell tower removed because the radiation of the said tower is said to be dangerous to the life of human beings and also flora and fauna, causing severe imbalance to the environment. And finally, 2016 in April, just a year ago, Israel bans Wi-Fi in schools. Wi-Fi is ordered immediately removed from all kindergartens and schools in the city to protect the children from radiation. A wired internet system is being installed. So it's a very simple solution. Some of the symptoms that they found in schools is the kids had dizziness, racing heart, weakness, anxiety, feeling faint, difficulty concentrating. Some of them were getting headaches. They were getting nauseous, and the parents were complaining and wondering what was going on with their kids, because they introduced Wi-Fi routers, and depending on the proximity, it can be really nasty on the nervous system. Here's some more shocking facts about Wi-Fi health dangers. It stimulates insomnia, disrupts fetal development, impacts cellular growth, reduces brain activity, more so in females than in males, but certainly both genders, neutralizes sperm count, impacts fertility, provokes cardiac stress, and may cause cancer. It looks like pretty much does cause cancer tumors, according to a lot of the research that's out there. So there were these 4 Swedish girls in high school that did this very innovative experiment. They had these watercress seeds. They decided to look at the indirect impacts of Wi-Fi. So they had 2 rooms growing seeds for a couple of weeks. And in the room with the Wi-Fi versus the room without the Wi-Fi, you can see the difference there. Obviously, the one on the left is the room that had no Wi-Fi signals. The watercress seeds on the right were in the room with the Wi-Fi signal. So they basically didn't grow. It killed them, destroyed the life force energy. So that's pretty compelling. What's it doing to human beings, to human DNA, to human nervous systems? So that was Wi-Fi, a little detour through Wi-Fi land. Now let's take a look at smart meters. Are smart meters safe? Well, in this little cartoon, you can see similar kinds of problems that you see with Wi-Fi: problems sleeping, fatigue, ringing in the ears, headaches, learning problems, heart problems, eye problems, leg cramps, balance problems. You see below there Mr. Smarty Pants and friends and their so-called side effects. So definitely an issue. I'm going to ask everybody here, I did a poll last time, but in order to save time, I'm not going to do a poll, but I will ask you in the comment section, do you have a smart meter? Yes or no? If you know that you have one, say yes. If you don't have one, say no. If you're not sure, say not sure. So I want to get a sense of everybody's response on that without doing an actual poll. So if you're not sure, go outside and look. You should see like a digital readout. There's another one. This is a GE meter, American company called PG&E. So they'll have a digital readout versus the old analog style meters that had this kind of this moving dial that went around and that sped up if you were using more electricity. And then meter people would have to come out and read those suckers. Now they don't have to if you have a smart meter. But here's a cartoon version of side effects. If you go on the internet, you will find there's certain websites that list literally thousands of negative testimonials of really challenging side effects that people are experiencing that they're attributing to having a smart meter installed in their house. So proximity is an issue. The other issue is that it's a pulsed radiation. It may be only a few minutes a day versus a whole day. Like per unit time, it's only maybe a few milliseconds that the pulse is on, but because it's a pulse, as we saw, it's not good for the biology. So if you want to find out where your smart meter is, if you don't know, and try to not stay in that part of the house as often, ideally you would want to see if you could get Hydro-Quebec or Hydro-Ontario to remove it. That won't be the easiest thing in the world. It's easier to refuse it before having it installed. But there are people who have been successful, and you need to get an electrician to install it, and you'd have to get a hold of the old style meters. Anyway, here's the side effects: sleep problems, insomnia, stress, anxiety, irritability, headaches, pressure in the head, ringing in the ears, ear pain, concentration, memory, and learning problems, fatigue, physical illness, muscle issues, disorientation, dizziness, and balance problems. I'm noticing that more and more people are having benign positional vertigo or different types of vertigo or balance issues. Why is that increasing? Might it be from the installation of these smart meters throughout North America and also other countries and different continents? Might that be the case that's causing higher incidence of balance issues and dizziness? More side effects: eye problems, pressure in the eyes, heart issues, cardiac symptoms and heart palpitations, cramps in the leg or neuropathy, arthritis, body pain, stabbing pains. Have you ever got stabbing pains in your head and wondered where they were coming from? And just like these weird stabbing pains that you feel for a few minutes or maybe even hours, and then they come and go. Nausea, flu-like symptoms. We saw that also with the Wi-Fi in the schools. Sinus problems and nosebleeds can also be caused by these smart meters, as well as respiratory problems, asthma. I bet you know someone with asthma. Could that be your signals? Skin rashes and facial flushing, urinary problems, or endocrine or neuroendocrine disorders, thyroid problems. The thyroid, there's the thyroid and parathyroid. It's involved with metabolism and growth and weight gain and diabetes and all sorts of things. So thyroid's a big issue. High blood pressure, hyperactivity, changes in children's behavior, seizures. Now, high blood pressure does tend to kind of rise with age unless you're doing something to combat it. Now, if you add age to this EMF recipe, especially with smart meters, then it's not a surprise that more people are having a lot of hypertension or blood pressure issues these days. So let's take a look at smart meter radiation compared to other types of signals. So we looked at cells, cell phones, and Wi-Fi. So these are adverse health effects that occur at very low levels based on peer-reviewed studies. And it turns out that smart meters emit wireless radiation pulses that peak at much higher levels, okay? So we can see on the left that you have 0.5 microwatts, milliwatts per meter squared. That's from the cell tower. That can cause headaches, disrupted sleep. Next over, 0.6 milliwatts per meter squared, Wi-Fi exposure actually alters brain function. So at that very low level, it starts to alter brain function. 5 milliwatts per meter squared, laptop Wi-Fi damages sperm motility, and DNA. Moving over to the right, cordless phones at 30 milliwatts per meter squared starts to disrupt cardiac function or heart health. Then moving up to the next one, this is the standards for the Russian and Chinese. They have 100 milliwatts per meter squared. Now, what's the actual smart meter? Well, in this measurement modality, we've got 400 milliwatts per meter squared. That's what the smart meters emit. What is the safety standards in US and Canada, according to Health Canada and FDA and so forth? Well, their safety limits are at 6,000 to 10,000 milliwatts per meter squared. In other words, they say anything below that is fine. But we see that the smart meter is much below that at 400. And much below that is where we start to see all these damages like DNA, sperm motility, cardiac, brain, and so forth. And I'm going to plug in this little video here because this one's really compelling. So this is kind of going to be an extension of that slide I just talked about. So really pay attention. It's about a 3-minute video.
The data we're going to look at are all published science, testing results, or public standards. At the bottom end of the radiation scale of what's called power density or signal strength is the minimum level at which cell phones will work, which was found to be 0.2 billionths of a microwatt per centimeter squared. Pine needles were found to age prematurely at 0.000027. At short-term exposures of 0.5, children aged 8 to 17 experienced headache, irritation, concentration difficulties, and behavioral problems. Point 1 is the biobiology or building biology guideline for extreme concern. 1.0 produced sperm DNA fragmentation and a decrease in sperm viability in vitro. Also at 1.0, the science shows the following bodily effects can occur: headaches, dizziness, fatigue, insomnia, chest pain, difficulty breathing, and indigestion. 2.5 saw altered calcium metabolism in heart muscle cells. 4.0, changes in the hippocampus affecting brain memory and learning. and at 6.0 DNA damage in cells. So, where are smart meters on this list? Electrical Power Institute in December 2010 measured a single Itron smart meter with pulses up to 7.93 microwatts per centimeter squared. Our own testing indicated approximately 8.0 with 1 meter. These tests are at a close distance, approximately 1 foot away from the meter, but an infant's crib could be just as close on the other side of the wall where the meter or bank of meters are installed. Even though there are all these known health effects at levels far lower, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg see fit to set the standard at 9.5. And China, Poland, and Russia, 10.0. This is the same level at which behavior has been altered, producing reflexes of avoidance following 30-minute exposures. A room of 12 smart meters, very common and even a conservative number in an apartment building, tested at 19.8 microwatts per centimeter squared. This is hundreds of times higher than levels which clearly indicate harmful effects. So how can utilities and governments get away with forcing these devices on everyone? This is how. In Canada and the US and several other civilized countries, the safety limit is set at 600 to 1,000 microwatts per centimeter squared. This so-called safety limit is literally tens of thousands of times higher than levels which are known to damage health, according to peer-reviewed published science.
So I just thought you might want to see that video. What they do is they set the standards ridiculously high, thousands of times higher than where damage actually begins, according to peer-reviewed studies. Now, what's going on here? Well, we see the non-industry studies on the left versus the industry studies on the right. Non-industry studies will have found that 70% of those studies show a harmful effect versus 30%. Versus industry studies, it's flipped around. They say, oh no, only 32% of the studies where they found a harmful effect and 68% no effect. So there's obviously a bias, there's obviously a conflict of interest because the industry studies are basically corporations, they're there to make money. The non-industry are more like academic, more just trying to do the peer-reviewed research. So what I want to do now is actually look at some EMF protection practices. So this is the practice part of the presentation. So pay attention to this. We're going to be talking about 3 different categories of protection that I've categorized myself. I just looked at the research and said, okay, we can sort of categorize into 3 different varieties of protecting yourself from EMF radiation. In the first instance, we're talking about basically avoidance or removal. So for instance, reducing exposure to specific devices like laptops and cell phones, removing actual devices or certain types of lighting systems or DECT-style cordless phones, and then just turning things off when not in use. Then we have the second category, which is basically shielding or neutralizing these energies. So you've got things called EMF balancers. We've got a guy in Ottawa, Mr. Steve Preby, that sells these things and balances out people's environments and schools and homes. There's certain types of crystals that are naturally shielding and grounding. You've got the pendants for the cell phones. And then I'm going to be looking at filters for dirty electricity in your home, as well as a substance called shungite, which is very special. Then the third category of protection is basically detoxing or recharging or grounding. So you have iodine you can take. You've got cleansing salt baths. You can do something called earthing. You can be in nature more often, or you can do antioxidant protection through nutrition. So those are all sort of 3 categories of protecting yourself. That was like a big picture, super fast overview. Now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in each of these areas. Now, of course, we live in a world of cell phones and smartphones and iPhones and Androids, and you know, kids are growing up with these things, and pretty much everyone has them now. So this is a tackle right off the bat. Let's start off with laptop safety, and we'll go into cell phones. So laptop safety, first of all, you want to have a secondary keyboard. So what happens is if you're, first of all, don't have the laptop on your lap. Even though it's called laptop, it should not be on your lap. It affects sperm motility in men, and it's got fertility issues in women. So you want to have, if you can, a secondary keyboard that actually distances you from the actual radiation of the computer. So you got a portable keyboard that you can hook into your computer, so the computer's a little bit, you're not actually over it and touching and being too near the screen. We've also got radiation shields that you can get. I'll show you a slide for that. Avoid Wi-Fi routers in the home. You can just turn them off when you're not using your internet, or the other solution is to use Ethernet and just hardwire it in like they're doing in many schools in Europe. Don't use Bluetooth headsets. They're even worse than cell phones. So if you've got a headset on, it's got Bluetooth signals, you're getting a worse type of radiation. Even the signals are kind of tiny in comparison because they're right up next to your ear. They're problematic. EMF blocking pendants for cell phones. There's a variety of those you can get. I'll show you pictures of those. They're supposed to shield some of the EMF from the phone, but I wouldn't rely on that solution entirely. And don't wear your phone, as we saw in that research with the Chinese lady that was wearing the cell phone in her bra 4 hours a day. She ended up with tumor right there, and then people that have them in their pocket, and also not a good idea. And avoid car use, because what happens in the car is it's searching for the cell tower signals, and then it's sending out beacons, and it's basically increasing the signal strength. And plus you're in a metal box, which is then amplifying the signal. So it's a really bad place to have your cell phone on and using it. A solution is just use airplane mode when you don't need to talk or use the internet or whatever. And that will prevent it from sending or receiving signals. Now, Wi-Fi precautions in particular, some kind of overview of what I just said. So just use an Ethernet cable. It's simple. Ethernet cable, you don't have this signal flying around your home all day, especially if you've got kids in the house and people needing Wi-Fi all over the house. It's kind of hard to turn off the router off and on. Definitely turn it off at night, but I would suggest just get rid of it entirely if you possibly can and use the Ethernet. That's what I do. I don't have Wi-Fi anymore in my home. When you're in a cafe, of course, you have to use that, but you don't want to spend a lot of time there. Patterns with different keyboard positions. You can see the one on the left is the worst. And when the person's got their hands over it, they've got more intensity there of radiation marked by the dark blue. And then as you see, the hands are down, it gets a bit lighter. And then the middle keyboard, the middle there position indicating a farther away keyboard, there's less radiation. And then there's a third option on the right. So, that's all to say, using the external keyboard is a good idea. Now, radiation that's coming from your laptop, aside from the Wi-Fi that you need to connect with the internet, you've actually got heat radiation, which is why one reason itself, don't put it on your lap. You've got radio frequency radiation coming from the computer. So again, don't put it on your lap. And then you've got extremely low frequency radiation. So you've got these three different types of radiation coming from the laptop itself. There is something called a defender shield you can use under the computer, which blocks all emissions for complete protection. So this is a great find, a defender shield. Combine that with the fact that you have a remote keyboard and no Wi-Fi, and you're much more protected when you're doing computer work that involves the internet. So let's look at smartphone precautions. Review them, actually, we just said them. Airplane mode, very simple, just turn your airplane mode on when you don't need to be receiving calls or doing internet or whatnot. And so there's what some of these pendants look like. Some of them are round, some of them are square. You just kind of tack them on, and they're meant to do a certain amount of shielding. But again, I wouldn't rely on that as your full solution. I would want to sort of distance yourself from the radiation or turn it off when not in use. There's another solution. We mentioned don't use Bluetooth headsets. You can use headsets that are called air tubes. And what happens is there's no electromagnetic energy coming into your ears at all. It's acoustic technology. You can see here the whole setup. You've got the mobile phone, which does emit RF radiation when it's on, but then it goes into a shielded cable, which prevents sporadic currents. And then that then goes into the air tube headphones you see in the middle. Now notice the speaker lower to your screen, the speaker, that's set away from your brain. So it's not going to be, it's isolating the EMF. So that's the only part that sort of has an issue. And then you look at the top, you've got the anti-drop earbud, ergonomic design, and so forth. So it's an air tube. You're not putting radiation in your ear. The cables are shielded, and then the speaker itself is away from the brain. So this is a good solution. So we talked about smartphones, laptops, Wi-Fi routers. Let's go to another category, home precautions. First of all, turn off appliances you're not using. People think, well, what's the big deal with appliances? They're not like sending out big amounts of radiation. Well, don't forget, all your appliances use electricity, and they all have different sort of energetic signatures. And remember, with the dirty electricity, this stuff starts to accumulate and add up. So turn off appliances that are not being used. Your stove's not being used, it's off. In terms of the fridge, that's kind of got to be on, but there's a lot of other stuff that doesn't have to be. Safeguard your bedroom from, in other words, from EMF devices or anything that can emit EMF signals, like phones or cordless phones, anything like that. Avoid certain types of lighting like halogen fluorescent tubes and what's called energy efficient compact fluorescent lighting. So avoid those types of lighting. They're not healthy for us. Then I'm going to show you something called an EMF bed canopy, which can almost completely shield your sleeping area. Amazing discovery for me personally a few months ago. So I was pretty blown away to find out about that. There's something called Y-Shield paint. It's a sort of EMF shielding paint that you can paint all your walls and rooms. This is really taking it to the next level, but I just thought I'd let you know about that. And then finally, for the dirty electricity, there's something called Stetzer filters to remove your dirty electricity. There's sort of a shot of what it looks like to paint your rooms, your walls with this sort of shielding paint. This is called GeoVital T98 Alpha. You have to ground the paint actually to the sockets, to the ground in the electrical sockets. So it's quite an endeavor. It's not an easy thing to do. But if you just want to go next level of protection in your house, that's how you can do it. So shield your sleep space. I'm going to show you. So this is called a canopy, an EMF canopy. So I'm just going to let's put on a video for that.
If you live in an urban or suburban environment, chances are that you live near a cell phone tower. And if that's the case, this is how much wireless pollution you are exposed to. Now, medical doctors and biologists around the world are starting to realize that the maximum amount of wireless pollution that we want to continuously be exposed to is a 5 on this device. And as you can see, we're normally over 100 and sometimes over 200. So if that's the case, one of the best things you can do is to get a net like this, which blocks about 99% of the wireless pollution from you while you sleep. This is particularly important for children because we simply do not know what the long-term health effects are of wireless pollution. What we do know is that it affects melatonin production, which affects the quality of our sleep. It also creates oxidation stress in our cells. So as you can see, when we're underneath the net, the amount of wireless pollution goes down considerably. So one of the most important things you can do for your health is to sleep under a net like this.
So let's talk about filtering your dirty electricity. So as I mentioned, so you've got clean electricity, you can see that kind of signal there, right? And then this other signal is superimposed, right, from all the different appliances, the background radiation, the RF signals, right? And then you attach a filter here. This is the whole concept of dirty electricity and how you can first measure what your signals are.
Okay, we're here today looking at dirty electricity, also known as high-frequency voltage transients, on an oscilloscope. The oscilloscope is plugged into this power strip, and the power strip is plugged into the wall. So these two meters here they're called Graham-Stetzer meters, and they've been used in many peer-reviewed studies. They measure high-frequency voltage transients. So we're going to plug in the first one, and this is normally adequate for going up to 2,000, but we're going to find out it quickly maxes out, and so that means we have over 2,000. Now it might be interesting to notice that 25 is safe, 50 is the maximum in many countries around the world, and at 75 or greater, the electricity radiating off the wires in the form of a high static charge, it goes internal to the human body, and that's where it causes problems. This meter here is an X10 meter. It goes up to 20,000. We're going to plug it in and see what we find out. Well, actually, we find out it maxes out and it goes over 20,000. And this is one of the dirtiest environments I've seen in over 4 years of measuring electricity. I'm going to reduce the gain on the oscilloscope so we can get a slightly better picture. And we can see here we're getting over 12 volts coming through of this dirty electricity. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take one of these Graham Stetzer filters, and it was developed by Dr. Martin Graham and David Stetzer, and we're going to put it into the same power strip here, and I want you to see the huge reduction in the dirty electricity on the 2 meters and the oscilloscope. Okay, so we went from over 20,000 down to 128. We can clean this up further by putting another filter into the wall socket. Your goal is to get it to 50 or less. And if we cleaned up the entire environment, you'd find out that, yeah, we can make it livable. Of course, this is money you have to spend. It's been calculated that it takes anywhere between, 300 to 600 to clean up a house. Maybe 3,000 depending upon the size of the house. This is money you have to spend that the utility isn't going to help you with to clean up the problem that they're delivering. Now take a look over here at the oscilloscope. With the filters in place, you have clean power. Take the filters out of the circuit, immediately the power gets dirty and dangerous again. This means this is an extremely hazardous environment for your dogs, your cats, your children, you, your unborn child. You do not want to be exposed to this. Once again, these are Graham Stetzer meters. This is a very simple oscilloscope, and this is a special filter. We're going to plug the filter in one more time so that you can see how easy it is to clean up your electricity. Now these meters plug right into a wall socket. It's as easy as plugging in any kind of device.
Let's continue. So that's a picture of the Stetzerizer microsurge meter. So to measure the signals, as he pointed out, they were far higher than they should be, way beyond the safety limits. And there's the actual filters themselves, Graham Stetzer filters that you can get. And there you see them plugged in, 2 of them plugged in there. You'd need to put them at different places in your home. Now here's a comparison. There's a different kind called green wave filter, and they do some comparisons here. I guess they're trying to say that they're better than Stetzerizer because they have some different features. The green wave is grounded, the Stetzerizer is not, and so forth. So you can check that out yourself, the green wave and the Stetzerizer. Now, green wave filters, according to them, remove erratic microsurges of energy from wiring, helping to normalize electrical current to 50-60. Now, they all do that, but this is just a different brand, so just something to let you know about. So now let's look at another category of protection. So crystals for EMF protection. I know some of us here that are on attending this live know about crystals, but there's specific categories of crystals, some of which are actually grounding and shielding. Particularly, you want to use what's called ferromagnetic stones, that they have the iron content in it. Lodestone or magnetite, hematite, pyrite, those are all so-called ferromagnetic stones. In fact, you don't want to use silicate type crystals like quartz and opal because they can actually amplify the EMF signals, the damaging effects. So you got to be careful on that. Black tourmaline, the third one down, turns out to be really, really helpful in this capacity. It can transmute energies because it combines 2 properties, piezoelectric and pyroelectric. Piezoelectric and pyroelectric, so these are 2 different types of properties. So it's a very powerful crystal. And I'm going to talk about shungite, very, very, very amazing substance. It was discovered in Russia, Karelia, Russia. It's considered to be 2 billion years old, and it's also considered a cure-all. And here's an important thing to note. In many cultures, all of these crystals that I've mentioned, they're also considered grounding. So what's considered grounding is often good for EMF protection. So there's obviously a link there. Now, shungite, as I mentioned, considered close to 2 billion years old. It's 98% carbon, and it comes from ancient organic remains. That's where it's derived from. It purifies water, it's an energy conductor, and it's an EMF shield. You can see the healing properties below. It's grounding, it balances the root chakra, it's cleansing and purifying. People use it to purify water. It's protecting and shielding from electromagnetic frequencies. It transmutes or protects from negative energies. It's immune boosting. It also is known to soothe insomnia and relieve anxiety, and that's just a subset of its properties. So that might be something to check out. Now, something we can do also in this capacity is grounding. So we're talking about shielding with crystals and grounding. Earth frequencies are good for you, so you want to do something called earthing, putting your feet in the earth. Obviously, it's easier in this climate to do that sort of in the summer, spring, and fall. Walking in nature, being near trees, being near rushing water, being outside after rain showers, all that stuff's, you're getting more negative ions. It's grounding, it's healthy. We all know that being in nature is good, but it's good for grounding. It's good for kind of detoxifying a bit from the EMFs. There's something called EMF grounding mats, which David Wolf endorses, and he actually uses them at his events. He says if you're going to be inside a building or a house or a government cubicle and you can't easily take off your shoes and walk outside on earth, well, then use EMF grounding mats. It really does protect against some of the stuff, toxic signals we're being exposed to. The Schumann resonance is the naturally occurring resonance in the planet between the Earth and the ionosphere. It's really healing. We need it. Turns out that astronauts were in space for several days and weeks, got sick because they didn't have the Schumann resonance, so they had to simulate it in space. So that's very important. They used to create these had these Schumann watches back in the day, 7.83 hertz. And now we find the Schumann frequencies have risen almost up to 40 hertz. So there's a whole range of it. It's not just one particular frequency, it's a range of frequencies. So just an overview of natural ways to reduce the dangers of EMFs. Don't carry a cell phone in your pocket or bra. Avoid using a laptop on your lap. Use a separate keyboard. Use a radiation shield. Avoid Bluetooth headsets. Use those air tube type headsets. We just mentioned earthing. It's very grounding. And take a barefoot walk on the grass or the beach or the earth. Protect your home, unplug appliances, keep your bedroom clear of EMF emitting devices, avoid halogen or fluorescent lighting, turn off Wi-Fi as much as possible or unplug it completely and use Ethernet cables. Now, we're getting towards the end, antioxidant protection. So we've got too many free radicals in our body and that we can get more of them because we're exposed to EMFs and other stressful things. Here's some superfoods which are high in antioxidants. There's the ORAC value. When you look at the ORAC value, the higher that is, the more the antioxidants. So we've got pecans, pomegranates, rosemary. Rosemary is good for stimulating alertness and cognition. Asparagus, blueberries. Blueberries are amazing. Walnuts, good for the brain, healthy fats. Prunes, broccoli. Broccoli considered a superfood. Cinnamon. Does many things, among them reduces blood pressure. Dates, cilantro, holy basil. Cilantro is quite amazing too. You want to get your omega-3 fatty acids in whatever way you can because we're getting too many omega-6s. Noni fruit, spirulina, and chlorella, they're both good. Complete proteins and they're full of nutrients, and then vitamin D3, very important. You want to upgrade that during the winter and find other ways to get lighting if there's not as much sun where you live. Finally, detoxing your body. I discovered this very interesting recipe. If you're familiar with Epsom salts or magnesium salts, they're okay, but I would go for Himalayan salts or sea salts if you can. Okay, but this one actually combines everything. It's got Himalayan, it's got magnesium. So you want a pound of Himalayan sea salt. So this is a detoxing bath, right? This is meant to actually detoxify you from the effects of electromagnetic exposure. So Himalayan or sea salt, a pound of baking soda, 1 to 2 tablespoons of something called ionic magnesium concentrate. It's got trace minerals as well as magnesium. Very hot water, as much as you can stand without burning yourself, and 1 tumblestone each of what are called serpentine and rhodonite. These are actually magnesium-containing minerals that are safe in your bath. And then when you take the bath after, don't dry off. Just rub down with magnesium oil. It's very healing to have magnesium oil or spray in itself. So if you do this, this could be a pretty potent combination. So try that out. You might want to research that, check out that recipe, and something you could do once a week, for instance. So let's do a quick overview. What did we talk about today? At home, you want to turn off appliances not being used. See if you can look into EMF canopies if you can afford it, because that night is when your brain is doing a lot of cleansing. It's rejuvenating you, it's consolidating learning and memories, and it would probably do that much better if you had a way to filter out the EMFs at night. Remove halogen or fluorescent tube lighting. In terms of laptops, get an external keyboard. Turn off your Wi-Fi routers as much as possible. Ideally, get rid of it altogether and just use Ethernet if you can hardwire it. And get a laptop shield that you put under your laptop to get rid of those various types of radiation that this laptop emits. Smartphones or cell phones, use airplane mode as much as possible when you don't need to use the phone. Air tube headsets protects you from the electromagnetics coming into the ears, and definitely avoid those Bluetooth headsets. Use air tube headsets. You can use EMF pendants on the back of your phones. Now, dirty electricity, we just talked about that. There's the green wave filters or the Stetzer, Graham Stetzer filters that completely cleans up the electricity in your home. Put your feet on the earth, walk on the earth, walk in the grass. There's those shielding, grounding crystals. Shungite is especially powerful. And then the EMF mats David Wolf recommends, and others. Now finally, detox. We talked about 2 ways you can do that. Antioxidant foods, getting rid of free radicals or reducing them in the brain and body. And then that magnesium sea salt bath recipe. Hope you enjoyed that. That's the end of the session. I'm going to talk about a couple more things here, and then we'll do a Q&A. But just want to let you know we've got a session coming up on the microbiome, balancing your microbiome for optimal brain function, next Sunday at 11. I'm actually going to do a poll on this, but here's a bunch of topics that I'm planning to teach in the near future on a regular basis. So take a look at this list. Here's some stuff that I'm going to be kind of zoning in on. 8 quick tips to boost your memory. This is your brain on Genius. Heart intelligence. How to relax your autonomic nervous system. Balance the ANS. Synchronizing various brain-body rhythms. How to avoid cognitive decline with 5 daily rituals. 10 superfoods and supplements for a sharper mind. Balancing your biochemistry with the right form of exercise. How to protect your brain from toxic EMFs. That was basically today's session. The science of musical medicine, an introduction. Your brain and creativity. Mapping your microbiome for brain longevity and health. Top 10 accelerated learning techniques. Tuning your musical brain. Optimal sleep cycles, tips and tricks. And frontal lobe secrets for a laser focused mind. So the frontal lobe one is one that I've talked about recently. So I am going to do a poll. I'm going to say yes or no. Would you be interested in learning about some or all of these topics that I just went over? That's a subset of stuff I'm planning to teach on a roughly monthly basis. So I want to introduce something called High Performance Brain Monthly. Just as I was about to start talking about this on the live cast, we had a technical glitch and the audio and visuals went out. And by the time I got back on and relaunched the broadcast, many attendees had left. So I'm going to go over this in a little bit more detail and depth. So what is this? High Performance Brain Monthly is a monthly membership that focuses on a variety of practices and habits and rituals to optimize the performance of your brain, to optimize neurological performance. So I'm going to be doing these live brain health webcasts once per month, and then what's going to happen is I'm going to do professionally edited versions of those videos, so you'll have video recordings, and you can potentially get lifetime access to those broadcasts. So if you miss something, or you want to review it, rewind it, fast forward, you can do so in the High Performance Brain Monthly Membership Portal. So what I'm offering for people that get into this monthly membership program is a special discount. You get 1/3 off all of my other existing digital brain health programs. So I've got 8 programs currently in Kajabi, and I've got a few more in development. So we've got some mini courses, I've got some 3-course bundles, and I've got a couple of signature programs that I'm working on, such as Build Yourself a Better Brain and Multi-Dimensional Mind, as well as the Science of Musical Medicine for holistic practitioners. So those are some of the more signature, more in-depth, extensive programs, but then there's mini courses as well. So you would get 1/3 off of any and all those programs while you're in the membership. So basically for the lifetime membership. So the offer that I've got going on right now is $33 per month membership. But for those of you that attended this live webinar, and register for this special, you'll get $11 off every month. So basically it's a third off the $33 per month, and that's tax inclusive, so it really comes to about $19.50 per month plus tax. So you get that, basically you get locked into that rate even when the membership goes back up to $33, and eventually it's going to go up to $47 or $49. Regardless of how high the price goes up for the membership later on, you're locked in to $22 a month inclusive for the lifetime of your membership. You can cancel at any time, but assuming you stick around, that is the price that you get, and that is the price that is maintained. Now, I'm also throwing in another bonus for people that get on board this soon, and there's only a limited number of these. It's a free brain health consultation that I do, worth $88. So that's a 45-minute consult, and I do a little bit of homework, so it's about 15 to 20 minutes of research on your specific area, because we want to really fine-tune, kind of get a laser focus as to the topic that you want to focus on. So I work with people that have had concussions to their brain, and we've made some decent progress, and we tend to specialize on whatever theme you want to, so it's up to you. We can cover just about any ground from a wide range of all the themes and topics. So I've created a model called the 8 Pillars of a High Performance Brain. Within those pillars, there are dozens of practices literally that you can do. So nutrition, exercise, yoga, mindfulness, sound healing, heart intelligence, cognitive exercises, accelerated learning. The sky's the limit. One other bonus that I'm offering is 2 extra live cast recordings. So we've already done a session on focus your frontal lobe. We just did one on electromagnetic frequencies and how to protect your brain. And there's going to be another session on the microbiome. So these are going to kind of be bonus recordings that are going to be installed in your High Performance Brain monthly membership portal. So you'll get that in addition to the regular live casts that are going to be recorded every month and placed in your portal, so you can have lifetime access to them and review them as you see fit. So one more issue about this: to get your 1/3 off of the membership deal, to get 1/3 off the $33, bringing it down to $22 a month, you need to apply this discount code, and it's Protect Your Brain. So when you go to the offer, just simply plug in that exact term, that phrase, and it should reduce the amount from 33 to 22, and then you can just put the purchase through. So if you have any questions, let me know. You can email me at gadmauro@gmail.com. Otherwise, you should see a link just below this video where you can click on that and get in on that offer. So far we've got 6 people that have gotten into the membership in the last week or so, and I'm going to do up to I think I'm going to do 12 of these, and then I can't do any more. So there's still time to get that brain health consultation bonus thrown in, and look forward to seeing you inside the portal. Have a great day.